This liquid fertilizer costs $0. Every product you've bought. Hello, friends. If you're watching this, chances are you love plants, but you're also a little tired. Tired of pulling the same weeds every spring. Tired of buying bottles that promise miracles, but leave your soil feeling empty a few weeks later. Maybe you grow herbs on a windowsill, vegetables in a backyard bed, or fruit trees you hope will still be thriving years from now. You care about your plants, you care about your soil, and you want methods that actually make sense, not just for one season, but for the long run. After many years working gardens, small farms, and living soil systems, I've noticed something strange. Every spring, we're taught to declare war. We spray, we pull, we burn, we treat our soil like a battlefield. And anything growing where we didn't plan, those so-called weeds as enemies stealing from our crops. We're told they rob tomatoes, starve lettuce, and ruin our gardens. But what if that story is completely wrong? What if the most powerful fertilizer you will ever use isn't sitting on a store shelf in a plastic bottle with a high price tag? What if it costs nothing at all and is already growing right under your feet? The very thing you've been ripping out in frustration. Today, I want to share a perspective that changed how I garden forever. We're going to look at soil differently. We're going to talk about an old practical method called Jadam liquid fertilizer, and more importantly, the way of thinking behind it. By the end of this video, you may never look at a dandelion, a nettle, or an overgrown corner of your garden the same way again. If you enjoy learning how to grow stronger plants by working with nature instead of fighting it, make sure to follow along. This is all about growing more, spending less, and letting the land teach us how it wants to be cared for. Before we can understand why this method works so powerfully, we need to slow down and ask a very simple question, one that most of us were never encouraged to ask. What is a weed, really? Modern gardening gives us a quick answer. A weed is a pest, a problem, something to remove as fast as possible, but that definition comes from a very short-term way of thinking. When you look further back at traditional farmers and systems like Korean natural farming, you find a completely different perspective. In those systems, weeds are not enemies. They are respected as nutrient pumps. Think about the plants we choose to grow. Lettuce, peppers, tomatoes, corn. Most of them are shallow feeders. Their roots stay close to the surface, living in the top few inches of soil. And that's exactly where nutrients disappear the fastest. Every harvest pulls fertility from that thin layer of earth. Season after season, it becomes weaker unless something restores it. Nature already has a solution for that problem, and for years, we've been pulling it out and throwing it away. Weeds like dandelion, nettle, dock, and lamb's quarters play a very different role underground. Their roots don't stop near the surface. They drill downward, sometimes 3 feet or more, breaking through compacted layers and reaching mineral zones your garden plants will never touch. These roots are not competing with your crops. They're working on a different job entirely. They mine calcium, magnesium, nitrogen, and trace minerals locked deep in the soil. Then they lift that fertility upward, storing it in soft green leaves. In other words, they take nutrients that were unavailable and concentrate them right where life can use them again. They are living mining machines, quietly rebuilding soil health without asking for permission. And when we rip them out and haul them away, we're not cleaning our garden. We're discarding one of the richest resources our land produces. Once you start seeing weeds as nutrient collectors, a deeper problem in modern gardening becomes impossible to ignore. This is where the real loss happens. Every time you pull a weed and carry it off your property, to the curb, to a green waste bin, or to a distant compost facility, you are exporting fertility. The land spent months, sometimes years, mining minerals from deep underground. And with one trip of a wheelbarrow, those nutrients are gone. Not just for today, but for your future harvest. In a very real sense, you are stealing from the soil that is supposed to feed you. Now, many gardeners push back at this point. But I compost my weeds, they say. And composting is a good instinct. It shows respect for organic matter. But even compost has a hidden weakness. Most compost piles are open to the air. Oxygen-loving bacteria move in quickly. They work fast. They generate heat. And they break things down efficiently. But that speed comes at a cost. As those microbes burn through plant material, nitrogen escapes as gas. That warm steam rising from a hot compost pile isn't just heat. It's fertility leaving your system. By the time that compost is finished, a large portion of the nitrogen is already gone. So, we're left with a hard question. If weeds are mining nutrients for us and composting leaks a large part of that value into the air, how do we keep the energy where it belongs? This is the problem Jadam liquid fertilizer was designed to solve. It asks something radical, yet incredibly practical. What if we could return everything to the soil, every mineral, every bit of nitrogen without letting any of it escape? To keep that fertility from escaping, we have to step away from conventional wisdom. This is the point where most gardening advice tells you to turn back. But to truly save the nitrogen, we must do the opposite of what we've been taught. We must embrace the rot. We must embrace the anaerobic. When weeds are fully submerged in water and oxygen is removed from the equation, the biology changes completely. There is no heat. There is no burning off of nutrients. Nitrogen doesn't rise into the air and disappear. It dissolves into the liquid. The plant cells slowly collapse, and everything they were holding becomes soluble. In this dark underwater world, a different community of bacteria takes over. These microbes work quietly, breaking plant material down into forms that roots can absorb immediately. Ammonium and amino acids. This is not composting at a slower pace. This is liquid recycling. The weed pulls nutrients from the soil. You rot the weed in water. Then you pour those nutrients straight back into the earth. Nothing leaves the system. That is why Jadam liquid fertilizer works so quickly. You're not adding raw material and waiting months for it to decompose. The digestion has already happened. The soil responds right away. Microbial life wakes up. What once felt like dead dirt begins to turn dark, sticky, and alive again. And here's the most important part. Nothing about this is foreign. You're not introducing chemicals from a factory or microbes shipped from far away. You are restoring what belonged to your land all along and returning its own minerals back to the place they were meant to be. By now, you might be expecting something complicated. Machines, pumps, special formulas. But this is where JLF surprises most people. It was never designed to be sophisticated. It was designed to work. You don't need technology to make biology function. You only need to stop interfering with it. All you need is a container that can hold water, a bucket, a barrel, anything plastic will do. Avoid metal. Anaerobic fermentation is powerful, and metal doesn't last long in this process. Now comes the real ingredient, weeds. Not one type, but many. Use what your garden is already producing. Fast-growing plants are fast because they are rich. Nettles, dandelions, grasses, chickweed, dock. Each brings something different. Together, they create balance. Leave them whole. Don't chop. Don't shred. Just pack them down tightly, pushing out as much air as you can. The goal is density, not precision. Then add water. Rainwater if possible. If you use tap water, let it sit overnight so the chlorine can escape. Make sure every leaf stays fully submerged. Nothing should float. This is where the transformation begins. And if you want to give nature a small head start, a handful of forest leaf mold is enough. Not required, but powerful. Once everything is submerged, it's time to close the container, but not seal it. This is a living process, and living systems create pressure. Gases need a way out. A lid that sits loosely or a cloth weighed down with a board is enough. You want to keep insects away, but you must let the container breathe. If you trap it tight, it will eventually force its way open. And then you do the hardest part. You wait. In warm weather, this takes about 2 weeks. When temperatures drop, it may take closer to 4. You won't need a calendar to tell you when it's ready. Your nose will do that job for you. When you open the container, the smell won't be sour or sweet. It will be deep, heavy, almost shocking at first, like wet earth, swamp gas, or fresh manure. Don't be afraid of that smell. That is nitrogen staying exactly where it belongs. Look inside and you'll see the change. The weeds that once stood tall have collapsed into a soft sludge. The water has turned a dark, rich brown. That is the moment everything comes together. The plants have released every mineral they pulled from deep underground. And now it's all in liquid form, ready to return to the soil. From nothing but weeds and water, you've created one of the most powerful fertilizers a garden can have. By now, it's clear that JLF feeds plants. But that's only part of the story. What most people never see is the shield it builds underground. In soil ecology, space is everything. Whoever arrives first controls the environment. When you pour JLF onto your soil, you're not applying nutrients the way bottled fertilizers do. You're releasing life. Massive populations of decomposer bacteria spread through the soil, coating root surfaces and settling onto every piece of organic matter they can find. Because these beneficial microbes occupy the space so quickly and completely, harmful organisms don't get a chance to establish themselves. Diseases don't disappear because they're poisoned. They disappear because they're outcompeted. This isn't warfare with chemicals. It's dominance through biology. And once this process starts, it feeds itself. The activity of these bacteria signals plant roots to release sugars. Those sugars in turn feed beneficial fungi and other microbes. The soil becomes more active, more connected, more resilient. This is the critical difference between chemical fertilizers and JLF. Chemicals force the plant to grow while the soil slowly dies. JLF does the opposite. It feeds the soil first, and a living soil knows exactly how to take care of the plant. At this stage, there's one thing you need to remember. This liquid is powerful. JLF is a concentrate closer to an IV drip than a regular meal. Used correctly, it builds life fast. Used carelessly, it can overwhelm young roots. Dilution is not optional. It is the rule. For established plants, large vegetables, mature fruit trees, anything with a strong root system, the standard ratio is 1 part JLF to 100 parts water. At this strength, the soil responds quickly without stress. For seedlings, transplants, or plants that are struggling, gentler is better. 1 to 300, even 1 to 500 is enough. At these levels, you're not forcing growth. You're feeding the microbial community that protects and supports the roots. Always apply JLF to the soil, never to the leaves. You pour it around the root zone where the biology lives. If the soil is extremely dry, water lightly first. Moist soil allows the liquid to spread evenly instead of concentrating in one spot. As for timing, once every 7 to 14 days is plenty. More does not mean better. Soil life needs rhythm, not pressure, to build strength and structure. There's one simple way to know if you've done it right. If the smell fades within an hour, your soil is active and hungry. If the smell lingers for days, you used too much. Next time, dilute it further. Something quiet but powerful happens once you begin using JLF. The work doesn't just change your soil. It changes how you see your garden. That corner you used to avoid because it looked messy, you start to recognize it as stored potential. Not neglect, but inventory. Those weeds you once pulled in frustration become a resource you mentally count, not a problem you rush to eliminate. Your garden stops feeling like a list of chores and starts feeling like a living system that's constantly giving back. This is where modern gardening often leads us astray. We're taught to control everything, to sterilize the soil, destroy anything we didn't plant, and then buy fertility back in plastic containers. It's a cycle that creates dependence and distance from the land. The more we try to dominate, the less resilient our gardens become. But older farming cultures understood something we're only beginning to relearn. Nature doesn't waste. Every fast-growing plant has a role. Every weed is responding to a need in the soil. When you ferment weeds instead of discarding them, you close a loop that was never meant to be open. The invaders become collaborators. The waste becomes wealth, and the garden transforms from a place where you fight problems into a place where you manage abundance. At that point, you're no longer just growing plants. You're rebuilding a relationship with the land, one where nothing is wasted and everything has value. The zero-cost revolution. The next time you pull a weed, pause for a moment. Don't throw it away. Don't leave it to dry in the sun. Drop it in water and let biology finish what nature already started. Then watch your soil change, turning darker, softer, and alive again. A healthy, productive garden doesn't require expensive bottles or constant purchases. It doesn't come from shelves or labels. The solution has been there all along, growing between the cracks, quietly waiting for someone to recognize its value. This is not just a method, it's a shift in thinking. When you stop fighting nature and begin working with it, your garden becomes stronger, more resilient, and more generous every season. Stop fighting nature and start collaborating with it. If this way of growing resonated with you, share it with a gardener who's tired of buying promises and plastic. If this story changed how you view the weeds in your garden, please subscribe and like the channel. We are uncovering the history and the methods that have been hidden for too long. Let's cultivate the future together. The next treasure of knowledge will be revealed soon.